You've probably heard of the black widow, but I bet you didn't know that the US was home to 6 different widow spiders, all of which are packing a potent neurotoxic venom, and they might be hiding in your backyard right now. The most common of these widows actually isn't a widow at all, but it's also a lot closer to a true widow than you'd think.
This is the false widow. While not technically a true black widow, I'd feel weird leaving these guys out in a video covering all of the North American widow spiders. And these guys are absolutely everywhere, covering almost the entire United States, especially in metropolitan areas.
They have a very basic spider body plan: a small little cephalothorax, long spindly legs, and an absolutely massive abdomen. And because of their dark coloration, they do look a lot like black widows. In fact, the most common species is called the false black widow for a reason. The best way to tell if you're looking at a false widow or a real widow is look at the underside. Because these spiders are so top heavy and sit upside down in their webs, just by looking down in the web, if there's no hourglass, it's probably a false widow.
They really do look a lot like black widows, and this isn't a coincidence. Both the false widows and the black widows belong to the family Theridiidae, the cobweb spiders. With over 3,000 species worldwide, this includes some really bizarre looking characters. But the thing they all have in common is this tendency to build tangled, messy webs in the forgotten corners of their habitat. We like to think of the potency of their venom as their most interesting ability, but later in this video we'll see that their webs pack a lot of neat secrets too. Most cobweb spiders have a pretty stereotypical body plan: large, bulbous abdomen with those long, spindly legs. But one of the biggest differences between false widows and black widows is I find that their abdomens almost have a blockier appearance, and their legs tend to be shorter and stubbier. Not to mention, many false widows are tiny, usually coming in at less than a centimeter in length.
But don't take these guys lightly. They may be false widows, but they're actually a close cousin to the true widows. And it turns out they have a pretty similar venom too. And while we don't know a lot about the venom of the false widows, we do know that a few of them are medically significant. Most spiders are venomous. Except for one very obscure family, spiders tend to use venom to subdue their prey. For the vast majority of spiders, that venom has very little effect on larger things like humans, so we don't think of them as venomous, even though they actually are. The false widows are kind of on the border of what we'd consider venomous to humans, because some of them actually can give you a pretty nasty bite. While typically it's not gonna spread beyond the affected limb, so if you get bitten on your hand, it might just mean your arm aches for a few hours. It's not unheard of for false black widows and some of the noble false widows to make you feel kinda sick for a few days. What's crazy is it's actually been shown that black widow antivenom works on false widow bites as well. So even though we haven't studied the false widow venom a ton, we would assume that structurally it's actually very similar to that of their much more dangerous cousins.
This is what we call a medically significant bite. If a creature's venom is powerful enough to make us sick, then it's packing a pretty significant punch. It's insane to think that such a small spider, tinier than a blueberry, has a potent enough chemical packed inside it to actually affect an animal as big as we are. But as we move up this list, we're gonna see the chemical power of the widows get even more impressive.
If you live in the southeast United States, you're probably familiar with this spider. This is the southern black widow, and it's actually kind of the standard black widow in the United States. This was the first of the widow spiders to be described, and actually every single species of widow native to the US used to be classified as part of the species before more recent research split them up.
The black widow, like all true widows, comes from the genus Latrodectus, which is a combination of the Latin word for thief and the Greek word for biter, making these venomous spiders the biting thieves. The southern black widow is about as standard as it comes, sporting a shiny jet black body and the characteristic red hourglass mark on the underside.
This striking color contrast is a form of aposematic warning coloration. It tells potential predators that this spider is dangerously venomous and they should keep their distance. It's actually also why the bright color is on their abdomen. Like other cobweb spiders, the black widow has a big bulbous abdomen on that tiny cephalothorax and long spindly legs, so they're fairly top heavy and actually sit upside down in their webs most of the time. In typical cobweb spider fashion, they like to spin their webs in forgotten corners of their environment, areas that have enough space that they can build their nest, but areas that are tucked away enough that they stay dry. In your house, this is going to be inside cupboards, in the corners of closets and cabinets, and sometimes old cardboard boxes in your attic and basement that haven't been rifled through recently. These spiders are surprisingly crafty though. I have found them in surprisingly tight nooks, in dead trees and fallen logs, even underneath cover that was quite tight to the ground.
Since they tuck away into such hidden places, bites usually happen by accident when you stick your fingers where you can't see. But widow spiders typically will do everything they can to scare you off before they bite, flashing that bright abdomen at you, even throwing gobs of sticky silk to make you feel uncomfortable and back off. But if she feels threatened enough, the widow won't hesitate to bite you. And this is where things get bad.
As that venom works through our system, it causes intense muscle spasms, powerful nerve pain, and even flu-like symptoms throughout our entire body. In bad envenomations, these symptoms can last 3 days up to even a full week. It's also said that the hourglass on their abdomen means if you're bitten, you only have an hour to live. But unless you just happen to be an hour away from death already and you're just incidentally bitten by the spider, no one's gonna die an hour after being bitten by a black widow. Their venom is potent, but there actually is no proof that anyone's ever died to the southern black widow in United States history. A bite from a black widow might make you wish you were dead for a few hours to a few days, but rest assured it's not actually a life-threatening emergency.
As we climb this list though, the bites are gonna get even worse than your garden variety southern black widow.
What most people don't actually realize is while we throw the term black widow around, there's actually 3 different species of black widow here in the US and 5 species of true widow spider that are found here.
This is the northern black widow. The largest of the widows here in the US, these spiders are truly a force to be reckoned with.
These spiders basically look like a larger version of the southern black widow with a few key differences. Number 1, the striking red pattern on their back. They almost looked sort of like the Australian redback spider, with a crimson stripe down their abdomen that's sometimes broken up into these blob shapes. If you flip them over though, their hourglass is actually split into 2 separate triangles, which is one of the better ways to tell you're looking at a northern widow and not a southern.
Like the southern black widow, these spiders are armed with one of the most potent venoms in the spider world. But how does it work? Widow spiders have a neurotoxin. Specifically, the active ingredient in their venom is called latrotoxin, named after their genus. And this thing is gnarly. Neurotoxins are specialized toxins that act on the nervous systems of their targets. Usually, widow spiders are using it on insects, their primary food source. But the beautiful thing about nerves is, all animals that move have a nervous system. From the smallest insect to the largest mammal, we have specialized cells running through our bodies called nerves, which use charged particles to send electrical signals. They're basically the circuits that allow our bodies to function. You use nerves to breathe, your heartbeat is controlled by nerves, and your brain is a huge mass of nerve cells. Without good nervous system function, we wouldn't be able to survive. Widow venom basically attacks certain receptors in our nerves, causing them to overfire. This is what causes the agonizing muscle spasms that you get when you're bitten by a black widow. Essentially, your nervous system gets thrown into overdrive, sending signals at an unusually high rate. For their insect prey, this causes them to short circuit and die. But for us, it's a world of pain.
And when it comes to venomous bites and stings, the dosage makes the poison. Spiders like the southern black widow are much smaller. So even though their venom is up to twice as toxic as this spider, they might be injecting less than half the venom that you'll get in the bite from a northern widow. More venom also means higher likelihood of systemic effects. So where a southern black widow pinch and release bite, you might get localized muscle spasms and some systemic fatigue. With the northern black widow, you might actually get more of that severe back pain, migraine, nausea, and vomiting that comes with severe latrodectism, the medical term for the illness caused by the bite of a black widow. This next spider is the last of the black widow species here in the US and potentially one of the most dangerous spiders you could possibly come across. The western black widow actually has the largest range of any widow in the US and it takes some of the most concerning traits of the northern widow and the southern widow and combines them into one very potent spider. These guys are typically bigger than most of your southern black widows, but they're also more toxic than the northern black widow. Depending on which study you reference, they might be the most venomous spider in all of the United States.
There's a rumor floating around that the black widow is 10 to 15 times more venomous than a rattlesnake. But how do we even measure venom potency?
We measure the potency of venom with a metric called LD50, or median lethal dose, where the smaller the number, the less venom it takes to kill something.
Rattlesnakes typically fall somewhere around a score of 2, which is quite toxic. The southern black widow ranges from 1.2 to 0.6, which is more toxic than a rattlesnake, but not quite 10 times more toxic. The northern black widow also comes in at 1.3 or 1.2, and its bite is only as bad as it is due to how big these spiders are. But the western black widow, they come in at a blisteringly low score of 0.26, making them the most toxic of the North American widow spiders, and actually fairly close to 10 times the toxicity of the rattlesnake. While there have never been any truly confirmed deaths to the black widow spider in the US, and widow bites usually aren't lethal, if any spider was going to kill someone, my money would be on the western black widow.
Because these spiders have such a huge range, their microhabitat is going to vary quite a bit throughout it. I've personally seen them quite a bit in places like Arizona in the Sonoran Desert, where they actually tend to occupy a lot of space. During the day, they're hiding inside crevices and stuff, which is typical widow behavior. But at night, they're actually emerging out into large, expansive tangled webs in the rock canyons they call home, and they're actually snagging flying insects out of the air. Typically, widows are hanging out close to the ground or in tight, hidden away spaces, but because these deserts are so dry, the western widow feels confident they can build these large nests that expand outside of the crevices they tuck into during the day.
The dry regions the western widows call home might also explain why their venom is so potent. In the Sonoran Desert, we see insects like the Maricopa harvester ant, which has the most toxic of all insect venoms. We see tiger and Mojave rattlesnakes, which have the most potent reptile venoms in North America. We even see the only venomous lizard in the US overlapping with the western widows throughout a good chunk of their range. And across the world, arid habitats give rise to extremely potent toxins like that of Australia's inland taipan or Chile's six-eyed sand spider. In desert habitats, resources are more scarce, which means competition is fierce. If you've taken up a role in the ecosystem where you need venom to secure meals and defend yourself, you want to make sure that venom is as potent as it can be. This makes sure your prey dies quickly and can't escape, and it makes sure that predators think twice before messing with you. Some studies even suggest that the latrotoxins these widows possess are an entirely defensive adaptation against large mammals that might be trying to eat them. This is going to be even more evident as we get into some of the stranger widows that call the US home. Turns out, not all widow spiders have the typical jet black body we're used to seeing. Some of them have insane colors and patterns like that of the brown widow. When I first learned this spider existed, I thought maybe someone had gotten the black widow and brown recluse confused, but nope. Across metropolitan areas in the southern US, there is a brown widow spider building tangled webs in forgotten corners.
The brown widow is an invasive species. We think it came from Africa in potted plants, but we're not 100% sure on that. But these spiders actually look insane. At first glance, these spiders don't look like widows at all. They're tan, and they're covered in these crazy geometric patterns. It's where they get their scientific name. But if you turn them over, there's the characteristic tell. A bright orange hourglass. It's a shame these spiders are invasive because I think they're one of the coolest looking spiders in the world. But they're actually posing a significant problem. First things first, these guys multiply extremely quickly in urban areas throughout the South. Sometimes you might not see the spider right away, but if you're seeing those characteristic cobwebs in the forgotten corners of your house, look for this: spiky egg sacs. We're not sure why their egg sacs look so weird, but this is a pretty conclusive tell that brown widows are in the area if you see it around. And like other widow spiders, these guys are highly venomous. In fact, they're one of the more toxic species in the US, if not the world. In the US, their LD50 tends to be around 0.43, which is about 5 times the toxicity of a rattlesnake. But some studies have shown them getting into the 0.2 range, which puts them up there with things like the Sydney funnel web. The weird thing about these spiders, though, is their bite doesn't tend to be all that severe. A lot like the false widows, despite the potency of their venom, they don't seem to inject a lot of it. So the effects seem to be localized. You're gonna have localized pain, swelling, and muscle aches, but it doesn't usually travel beyond the affected limb. So I'd be like, great, they're not as dangerous as the black widow. Why am I concerned? And the reason is they're actually displacing many of the native species. They've been known to target and eat other cobweb spiders, particularly the native widows of the US. In areas where invasive species are able to take root and really get established, we see massive biodiversity declines across the board, not just among the species that they're eating. And this is because of the fact that our world is made up of these complex interactions that we don't fully understand.
When we displace natural predators, it can have ripple effects on the balance of an ecosystem. Brown widows multiplying out of control could have unforeseen effects on bird and reptile diversity, possibly even trickle up to affect the mammals that share their habitats. These spiders don't seem like much, but their impact is not invisible, and the craziest spider on this list is a perfect example of this.
This might be one of the rarest widow spiders, not just in the US, but in the entire world. This is the red widow, and when I first heard of it, I didn't think it was real either.
This isn't the sort of spider you'd find in your house. The red widow is endemic to the white sand scrubs of central and southern Florida, remnants of ancient island chains from when Florida was mostly underwater many millennia ago. The wildlife of these scrub habitats is really, really weird. Strange lizards and insects swim beneath the white sands, while bark-like mantises hunt in the trees. But the real gem of these scrublands lurks in the saw palmettos and scrub oaks. In the depths of strong, tangled webs are these spindly red spiders that are hiding a toxic secret.
I've covered this spider in the past on this channel, and I've gotten comments accusing me of doing AI video or using CGI models in the video, but this is actually what the spider looks like. Bright red carapace, long, spindly orange legs, and those crazy red splotches all over its abdomen. It looks like something out of an anime, and their story is even weirder. Now, if you're enjoying this deep dive into the biology of the widow spiders, I actually want to expand this series and talk about the other venomous spiders of the US, things like the recluse spiders and the wandering spiders. So if you do want to see more deep dives like this, consider subscribing to the channel. Not only do they look strikingly different than other widows, they also have a bit of a different lifestyle. Where your typical widow spider likes to hide under cover and inside of logs and trees or rock crevices, these guys actually live kind of out in the open. And almost like how the western black widows hunt in those rock canyons of the Sonoran Desert, these guys hunt in fly-through zones, areas of open space where little beetles and flying insects are zipping through and get snagged in the web out of midair.
And it's this web that makes the widows so special. What looks like a tangled random mess is actually one of the most ingenious survival strategies in the animal kingdom. This web looks random, but it's a finely tuned engineering masterpiece. The tension in every strand is just perfect that the web becomes an extension of the spider's mind. She can detect and read the slightest vibration, using it to hear things in her environment and also hunt her prey. When an insect becomes snagged in her web, she can tell how big it is and exactly where in her web it is. She's on it in an instant and knows from the strength of the vibrations how much venom she needs to inject to kill it. And once the insect is wrapped in her silk, there is no escape. This silk is a marvel of spider biology. The widows produce one of the strongest webs of any spider, 10 times stronger than steel by weight, with a durability similar to that of Kevlar. The widow spiders are not to be underestimated.
Like the rest of the widows, these guys have a potent neurotoxic venom, but their venom is actually the least toxic of the North American widows, coming in at only only 2.2 on the LD50 scale. You're thinking, okay, probably not a very bad bite, right? And for the most part, you'd probably be correct. I'm actually one of the few people in the world who have been confirmed to have been bitten by the red widow spider. In my case, the bite of the red widow was pretty mild in terms of widow bites. I had mild aches and pains throughout my entire arm. At its maximum, it was kind of the soreness and weakness that you feel after a particularly strong session at the gym. Basically, for about 12 hours, I felt like I'd hit arms particularly hard that morning. I did notice that the arm was a bit sweatier and that the next day it was a bit more tired and fatigued, but overall, the red widow bite was pretty inconsequential. But from reports that I've read, this might not be the case for everyone. There are cases from respected naturalists who study these spiders who were bitten and reported that the symptoms became chronic. Now, in my case, it's been 2 years and change since I was bitten by the red widow, and I've yet to feel any extended effects, but because these chronic cases exist, the red widow is one spider that I would encourage most people not to mess with. Now, of course, how venomous these spiders are, it's easy to see them and think that spiders must be terrifying, because holy crap, these spiders are super venomous, their bites are terrible, and these spiders are everywhere in the US. But the truth is, the venom of these spiders is just a byproduct of their evolution. It's an adaptation that served them in the role they play in our ever-complex ecosystem. And while I'd agree widows probably aren't the best ambassadors for spiders because all we think of is the bite, there actually are some really insane and weird spiders out there. Throughout my travels, I've had the chance to work with a number of really unusual spiders, some of which are so weird, you probably would be surprised they even exist. If you want to see those spiders, check out this video right here. Hope to see you there, but until next time, don't forget to get outside and find your own adventure.